Thanks again, everyone, for coming to this session today. We'd like to start by just thanking our hosts and our sponsors, the University of Washington Smart Center, Kaiser Permanente, and OSPI. My name's Tanya May. I'm the OSPI Director of Special Education, and I am so excited to be your host for this session. As we said a little bit informally before, just share your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to monitor that and answer as many of them as we can today. So it is my honor to welcome Amy Campbell to our virtual MTSS Fest. Amy is a special educator at Helen Baller Elementary, and she's also our Washington State Teacher of the Year for 2020. So our session today is on the effective implementation of accommodations and modifications to improve student access. And so before I pass this off to Amy, I wanted to just share a little bit about her. Amy's been teaching at Helen Baller Elementary School for 12 years. And in her position as a teacher of students with significant learning challenges, she collaborates with staff, parents, and community to develop individualized plans that focus on each student's unique skills, abilities, and interests to help them find their place among their peers in the school community. And I really love this. Amy does not live in a world of deficits. She lives and teaches a world of possibilities, potential, and opportunities. And I'm excited to share that I've been able to see that firsthand in working with Amy, which has been an honor. Amy believes that she can have a broader impact in the community by being both a leader and a learner. She participates in professional learning communities where she's developed her understanding of trauma-informed teaching and educating students who experience poverty. Her broad knowledge of state services and agencies enables her to connect families with outside supports. She believes in the power of inclusion, where everybody can participate, learning together, and experiencing diversity as an asset. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now so that Amy can begin.
Okay. Yes, I want to share my screen. Let's see. So as Tanya said, I got a little emotional when she was reading that. Partly because I absolutely love what I do, but it just took me right back to Helen Baller and my classroom and the students who, the 620 students at Helen Baller that I get to see and serve every day. And I know that it probably gets you guys emotional too, as we start to imagine implementation of MTSS now for our students in creating access and revisioning our classrooms and our schools moving forward. It's exciting and powerful. So I'm going to actually turn on my closed captioning now. I'm doing a Google presentation. I hit present, and then a really cool accommodation that you can have right now at your fingertips. I'm going to do Control-Shift-C, and what you're going to notice is that, and I hit the space bar. You're going to notice that the closed captioning came onto the bottom of your screen. So this is a great accommodation for children or adults, children, anyone who's accessing the presentation and can't hear what I'm saying. Maybe they can't see my lips, or maybe they don't have their interpreter available to them. But also in this age of COVID, what I've noticed is when my broadband starts to cut out and the audio gets choppy, hey, you guys can still read what I'm saying. So hopefully that helps. But also drop a message to Tanya if things get bad and we need to make some adjustments. So the objectives for today's session, I'm going to assume that we have people here with a variety of experiences, teachers, administrators, gen ed and special ed teachers. And like George Sakai talked about, MTSS is really about bringing this team of individuals together to center on and support students, which is one of the joys of my job, and I think something we're looking forward to as we move forward and work together now. But what I want to provide is sort of a global understanding of why we use accommodations, an understanding of when and where we would use accommodations, and to what extent how that could be beneficial. And then also, I want to delve into sort of starting to develop a limited catalog of available accommodations and modifications that we can implement in our schools, our communities, our classrooms that are going to improve student access. And this is really exciting to me because before COVID-19 hit, and we started to have to reinvestigate how we're serving students, I was on sort of a traveling roadshow talking about inclusion, moving inclusion in the state of Washington forward, and understanding what inclusion is. And so I wanted to throw this out there because I think as we're picturing the MTSS pyramid, and I'm going to throw a screen of that up here too, I think we need to just start to get a picture in our mind of inclusion. What is it now? What was it? How do we move it forward? And so I like these two diagrams. Inclusion is about creating meaningful access to academic and social opportunities. And another accommodation, guys, I'm going to make, you can follow me now. I'm moving my cursor down. I don't know if you can see this. As I lower it in Google Slides, it allows me to click on pointer. And this should help you guys track my mouse on the screen as I'm presenting. It makes me a little motion sick sometimes, so I'll try not to move it too much. But the idea that in our classrooms every day, we have all this diversity, the puzzle pieces that are separate, and they bring everybody's bringing something different, and inclusion and finding ways to increase access to the core and the tier 1 content that we want our students to be involved with means teachers being innovators and teams being collaborators, so that we can create this inclusive experience where everyone having something different to contribute really does fit together, and we can have a stronger community. So I love that idea. What we're doing when we're thinking about MTSS is we're building communities in our classroom where we can all contribute, where we can all be successful. And then this other picture, as we're thinking about how we're serving students, that we're creating systems where all our students are learning together and getting the strategies and the accommodations they need to achieve success together. And the only, I think the drawback as I'm looking at these models, and something I want you to consider as we're moving through this presentation, is that all these dots in the middle, these red dots that are supposed to be maybe the core of our students who benefit without, like George was talking about, without extensive accommodations or modifications or interventions, that I don't think they're as homogeneous as this model would have you believe, that they aren't a bunch of same red dots, that all our students are so different. We're learning that. We've known that forever as teachers. We know the differences our kids bring. And so as we're imagining implementation, just remembering all our students are so different. And this is just a small piece that I want us to imagine, another piece of information as we're building our understanding about how and where we serve children and how important this is. That as we're looking ahead into our future, that least restrictive environment for all of our children is the extent that they can receive services with their general education peers. And the students in Washington are pulled out of the general ed for a lot of reasons, for different services, and that's important. Teams are deciding these services, and that's critical. I don't want to question that, but I do want us to start to develop our thinking around how do we create opportunities in the general education setting for all of our students, utilizing accommodations and modifications, and how do we, as George was saying, not see our children as tier 1 kids or tier 2 kids or tier 3 kids. How do we not imagine them as LRE1, LRE2, or LRE3 placement kids, but really, how do we see how we get all the all to all students, the core to all students, and then how do we scaffold from there. So, and all of this is so important because as you're thinking about your population, the kids who we serve in our classrooms, in our communities, 1 in 5 people in our communities, in the world, experience a disability of some sort. And I'm going to, I don't want to use the term disability throughout, even though I specifically work with students who experience disabilities and other things. I want us to start to imagine the disability or whatever else is impeding their ability to access the core as a barrier. And I think that language, imagining the things that students come to school with that inhibit their ability to access the core in traditional ways, those are barriers. And so 1 in 5 students experience a variety of disabilities that impact their the ways they access. And what we're seeing so clearly now is that all our students have a variety of barriers they come to school with. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What are the barriers around students who are hungry when they come to school, or they don't have safety at home? How do these prevent accessing and understanding and benefiting from content? What are these barriers and how do we address them within our systems? What are the social or cultural barriers our students come with? And there's a myriad of these, but emergent bilinguals, students who are English language learners, that could be a very clear barrier to their accessing the core without some accommodations that I want to talk about us being able to provide. Emotional factors and trauma. George hit very clearly on the trauma our children are experiencing now, the trauma our teachers are experiencing now, and the trauma they'll be experiencing and recovering from as we move in to future iterations of education. And so how does that trauma affect how children access the core? And how do we provide how do our accommodations we provide allow them access? And then so many other personal issues. And so I want us to just think about there's a lot of barriers our kids come with, and as you're imagining what to do with these accommodations, be thinking about the groups of kids you're going to be able to serve. And I'm so glad that George's pyramid and my pyramid look so similar. And he talked about the continuum that is MTSS. This model, and this, I love this. It's in the slides you're going to get. When you take this information back to your teams, you can take this slide. It's from the US Department of Education. And what I really like is it's showing our continuum where our students can find themselves in this learning process. It doesn't divide off a top shelf of tier 3, a middle shelf of tier 2, a lower shelf of tier 1. We have kids who are experiencing all over this continuum, and our ability to provide universal design for learning, our ability to provide structural supports and specially designed instruction throughout helps them achieve success across this continuum, and with an ultimate goal of making sure that all our kids are getting access to this core to the extent possible. And that's where the accommodations are going to come in that are going to help us get those kids there. So I want you to take, if I had his hand clap thing, look up from your plank just for a second at the pyramid that I showed, and imagine, and this is just maybe your experience, maybe not, but think about it. Sometimes what I find is students who receive a lot of these tier 3 interventions, sometimes they receive them pulled out or separate from what's happening down here in the core, and they could be missing core content, they could be missing opportunities with their peers, and also the type of instruction they're getting at this top tier could look very different for a lot of reasons than this core. So as I move forward, keep that in mind, because this pyramid, all the pyramids of education, this pyramid speaks to the type of material children might be getting. And so this is, sometimes I imagine Bloom's taxonomy as sort of a flipped upside down MTSS. And what can happen in our attempt to make sure students who need the most intensive direct instruction, those tier 3 interventions, oftentimes they are getting a lot of really clear discrete trial interventions on recalling facts and basic concepts. They could be classifying, describing, explaining, locating, recognizing. But I want to make sure in our flipped pyramid model that they're also getting a lot of opportunities, that students who are in that core and getting that core, that they're getting opportunities to create, that they're getting opportunities to evaluate. And I see this for my students who experience moderate and profound level of impact from disability barriers, that if I'm not innovative with accommodations that promote access in that core, then I could end up in a model where my students are just getting discrete trial access to information. So all of this is painting you a big picture of why we want kids in the tier 1 and tier 2, that they're getting those foundational skills and access to the core, and making sure that that we're intentional when we're pulling kids out to get the very intensive instruction we know they need. And the value of the team, because these are really heavy questions about how and where we serve kids. So accommodations, they mean access for everyone. And so as I move through some of the accommodations, I want you to think about how we're removing barriers to learning. And we're changing how kids learn, how we get them information, how they show us what they know. We are not changing what they learn, and we're not necessarily changing the standard, which is really important. We're not creating lazy kids. We're not lowering the bar. Accommodations are just shifting the way kids get information so they can access it. And that was my next point. It's oftentimes, and I think this is so true right now during COVID, that we're going to make the least dangerous assumption. And this is related to the idea that it is the least equitable thing we could do is to just stop teaching, because the kids who have the fewest opportunities will have the least opportunity to grow. We need to make sure we know that all kids can learn. We just need to make sure that we're getting that information to kids, so the kids who have the least access and the most barriers can make some growth, because the kids with the most barriers are the ones who need the most support. And we can do that. We as teachers know what it is. So I don't know if that was completely clear, but the idea that if we understand, we know as teachers, all of our kids can learn. We just need to be innovators and figure out how we can do it. Understanding that it's going to look different, understanding that kids will benefit at different ways in different times, but not giving up and throwing our hands up and saying that too many barriers. And I have not heard that at all during COVID. I've really just seen a lot of innovation. So accommodations and modifications are available to you and your team to create and put into IEPs and 504s. And that's where you'll find them. And I think that's a great foundation for, as we reopen schools, making sure that we understand the accommodations and modifications that are on kids' plans that we need to be aware of, that we can implement with fidelity. And I kind of like this, I gotta move my picture. I like this comic over here because it demonstrates, as you're implementing your accommodations for students, that the things that provide access for students who need something slightly different are actually going to be good for all your kids. So I hope, I can't hear you, but maybe you're laughing. The student over here who is in a wheelchair says, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" And then the custodian, this is not my Helen Ballard custodian, by the way. "All these other kids are waiting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I'll clear the ramp for you." And then the student in the wheelchair very clearly points out, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." So as teachers, we get this opportunity to shovel the ramp so all our students have access. And I'm finding during COVID, teachers are doing an amazing job shoveling the ramp, improving access for everyone. Obviously a work in progress, but we're getting better at it. And so then the other example I want to give of an accommodation that will hopefully help clarify how we are not changing the standard, just overcoming a barrier, is my glasses. I like to give this example. So I have a vision disability and a vision impairment, and it's a barrier to my accessing information, written information, or a number of things in this world. I'd love to take my glasses off and show you how difficult the world becomes, but it's very frustrating when I do that. And so when I was in school, I have two teachers, my parents are teachers, and I had a lot of literacy growing up. I loved stories, I loved reading. But in kindergarten and first and second grade, it was very clear that something was impacting my ability to access the core. And I was getting frustrated. And so I was enrolled in a host reading program, a tutor reading program, and I really liked it, but I was still struggling. And it was when I got into third grade that my teacher noticed, it maybe the barrier is not her understanding, conceptual understanding of the literacy that we're providing her. Maybe it's a different barrier, a vision barrier. And so my family got me they got a vision screening, and of course they got me glasses, and suddenly, the world came into perspective for me. And so did reading and language and literacy. And so that simple accommodation of finding glasses for me helped me overcome the barrier of not being able to see. And I think the message I want you to take from this is, as a learner, I was not able to identify for my family or my teachers why I was so frustrated, why I couldn't read. I knew that it was hard, and I was, that frustration often would lead to me being disengaged. It would lead to sometimes me not trying. It would lead to a lot of things, and my family was very empathetic, and my teachers as well. But I was also not able to advocate for myself in any way to find the accommodation that would help me, because I didn't understand my experience was different or unique. I just knew that reading was really hard. And so as you're thinking about accommodations and how we're going to find what works for kids, that's where that relationship is so important as teachers and administrators and specialists, being able to really understand the barriers a child has and then match strategies that are going to support them. And I have to give one more example of from my classroom. So I get so excited thinking about these projects and my kids and the classrooms coming back, and I know you do too. So I have a student last year that we have a 4th grade project that everybody does, and it's part of the tier 1. It's social studies, it's reading and literacy, it's writing, it's a bunch of pieces all together. It's a lot of creativity and synthesis. And students read chapter books about historical figures, and then they put together a presentation, and then they get to pretend to be that person. And so the students who I work with have a lot of barriers, and one particular student is a recently adopted student, and she's an English language learner who'd been in an orphanage, so she had very limited world experience and also neurological differences. But we were, as a team, we were able to identify a lot of her strengths. She's very tenacious. She's a very strong visual memory. She loves helping people. And so as we were trying to contrive as a team, get her into this tier 1, even though she definitely needs a lot of, as we're thinking about tier 3 intervention, she needs a lot of support. How are we getting her in there and accessing the core? So we looked at all these things, and we were able to match that some people she could choose from, obviously voice and choice, and she was able to pick Anne Sullivan. And I get emotional. It was so exciting. So she, rather than reading the chapter books, the standard is that we want her to understand the character, the person, and we had her reading picture books and watching YouTube videos for content in the classroom as other children were reading their books and creating. She was watching YouTube videos that she could watch, back up, watch again, and do some of this learning in that way. Because the reading was tricky and we wanted her to be able to present, we were able to use pictures that we found, Google Images, she printed, and we acted out the scenes with her so that when she was looking at the pictures, and this is her presenting to our principal, she was able to look back at the visual representations and share her learning. And the thing that was really powerful for me as we were finding the accommodations that would help her access and not lower the standard, but open this door for her, was the learning that happened in that inclusive community moving forward. As she learns the accommodations that help her access and understand her world, so too do her peers. And then talking about the ways she is able to access, when projects come along, activities come along in the future, it's not just a teacher saying, how about we try this, or don't forget to try that. I had peers coming up and saying, you know, I think I've seen a YouTube video about this, and I think if she can just watch this video, then she can do this too. And isn't this the community of education, the relationship that we create in our classrooms, and the learning about learning that happens is, to me, it's just the exciting part. We taught her a lot about who she is and what she's capable of, but those same accommodations were able to show the rest of our classrooms in our school how they can be helpers and supporters and understand differences. So one last slide before I give you some resources, which is probably what you're looking for. But hopefully you're all getting really excited about collaborating with your teams and finding the accommodations and the ways we include students in that tier 1 and tier 2. These visuals I didn't come up with. I wish I could take a lot of credit, but I cannot. And I think we've seen a lot of this. If we give everybody the same, then some kids are never going to see what we want them to see. And that's similar to this equality picture up here in the upper right-hand corner. One teacher giving out one thing. And we're seeing right now during COVID, that is not enough. Just handing everybody a Chromebook and making sure everybody has access to the internet, that's this. We still have kids who aren't accessing the learning. We can recognize that. And so then we're trying to maybe build up structures for our kids who need a little bit more support. We've recognized that. And that can be a great way for everyone to get a look at what we're doing. Maybe they can see and participate. But I think here's where we want to go, where we're breaking down the barriers to learning and creating the opportunities within the core where everyone can participate with whatever they bring to the table. And this expert learning down in the lower right-hand corner, I love this idea that it is going to look so different for everyone, but everyone in that room sees that that's okay. And so there's a lot of the learning we want to talk about around accommodations. We're teaching about differences, and that's such a great lesson too. And we're teaching all of our students that you can achieve success here, and we can support you in doing that. What a gift as a teacher. So moving into the actual things we can do, I want to start with assistive technology. And this is really exciting because some of our students in Washington actually have technology available to them. Some of them don't. And I think that's a conversation we want to keep having as we move forward. How do we get technology to all of our students in Washington if we value that as something that's going to move education for them forward? But low-tech assistive technology in our classrooms, adaptive paper and pencil, colored overlay, slant boards, word banks that we can make words available for students, and alternative keyboards. These sorts of low leverage accommodations can actually be game changers for students who may be experiencing fatigue, who may have limited fine motor dexterity problems, who may have like processing delays, or language delays. These sorts of things can break down a lot of barriers. And I want to just mention, as you're looking at the slide deck later, within all my accommodation modification recommendation slides, I've included links at the bottom of each page where you can go see just scads of great low-tech accommodations, or high-tech accommodations, or visual other accommodations. So you can access those and go see lots of options for yourself. High-tech assistive technology is amazing right now. You can see that Google has provided me an opportunity to close caption my work as I go. And that voice recognition is going to be a powerful resource for some of our students who have problems organizing their work or creating volume. I think a lot of as we're thinking about trauma-informed educational practice, I don't know how many of you are having problems just getting started, getting words on paper, creating volume. You have ideas. How do you get them out? I think assistive technology provides us a great opportunity for using the voice to text, for using predictive technology and typing to help students generate and see that they can generate content. And I want to make sure I'm talking. And then a lot of our devices now within the settings, I want you to, if you have students who have vision issues or other, then you can adjust the settings to make them high contrast, to make the cursor bigger, to help screen readers to have text read back to you so that you don't have to have a reader in the room with you anymore. But if you've got volumes of information that you can comprehend, but the fluency part of reading it is slowing you down, then screen readers are going to be a great way to help students get information. I actually read a really fascinating blog yesterday about how we keep getting told as a society, now is your chance for reading. But on the whole, even adults are having a very hard time sitting down and focusing on text to be able to consume a large volume of literature right now. And so I thought, oh, that's so fascinating. What accommodations do we have available so we can continue to digest information and receive information and limit the barriers or the impact of the barriers that the trauma of this experience is having on all of us? I think, so within our classrooms, oh, we have so much, we're doing good on time. I feel like I'm plowing through, but now might be an interesting time. I have 4 genres of accommodations that I'm going to be talking about. The first one is presentation. And so if you have, I'm looking up here, if you have an amazing presentation accommodation that you use in your classroom or your setting, and you put it in the question and answer box, then Tanya will be able to read those out and we can add to my list. Because I wanted to kind of call us all back to either what you're doing now, maybe during COVID-19, that's helping with presentation for kids who have these accommodations, or what you're doing in your classroom that is overcoming barriers for students who just need to see information differently. So if you have a great idea, I listed a few, throw it into the Q&A and they'll watch, and maybe we'll get some audience participation, which would be really fun. So presentation accommodations are ways that we change the way we get content to students. Larger print, of course, if magnifying devices, which could be glasses, notes and outlines in advance for all of you who were like, do you have the slide deck? Because I do like to have a tangible thing to help me organize my ideas. Sign language. We can offer tactile presentation of Braille and auditory for students who may have, they may have fluency issues or other issues, and we want them to get the content without experiencing the barriers that they have. And this could be audiobooks, readers, other students reading, staff reading, personal amplification, and visual and auditory is kind of that pairing. So how are you seeing it and hearing it, and with like screen readers or closed captioning? Tanya, did anybody have any great presentation ideas they're using?
Yeah, we do have some. So
Yay!
We've got someone shared, somebody shared Flipgrid, which my kids have been using. So I've been able to be a parent learner on that as well. That's a great idea, Kristen. And then Michelle White shared about Loom. I don't know that one, but they can pre-record presentations and then do something that's called What's in the Bag, looking at physical items.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Was that Loom, like L-O-O-M?
That's what it says, yep.
Oh, I'm so looking this up. So I went to a Flipgrid training and we ended up using Seesaw for my students as one way. And that has been an amazing experience. I'm glad someone brought that up because it gives so many options for me to be able to tell them in a video with a picture and auditory what the assignment is with examples, and then they can send it back to me in a lot of different ways.
We have a couple others too, Amy. Laura Lay shared that in the classroom I lost my text. She prints the presentation with lined note-taking space next to each slide. And then Lucas shared about Screencast-O-Matic, which, yep, free resource to let people record the screen, either alone, like with a webcam, or doing both simultaneously. He uses it to review essays and give feedback while specifically pointing out areas. Amy shared that she uses Seesaw. I've heard of that one as well, that students can listen or read along with a story and then do an activity using the words in the story. And Brandy shared about using Class Dojo.
I love it. got notes here.
These
That
are
is
great.
I think, and this is really great. What a great reminder that that interactive piece of what we do in classrooms is so valuable. So a lot of those will probably pair well with response accommodations, and I'd love put them in the Q&A as we're going because we'll hear these too. And these allow students to complete assignments and activities in different ways. And this has been really important, is especially I think now during COVID, we're having to figure out how to help kids show us what they know. With limited access to internet, with limited access to, how do we get kids to represent and have an artifact or something and generate something that we can understand and they can share. And oftentimes, so voice recordings, I think things that I was doing less in the classroom that I'm doing more now during COVID, and I want to make sure I'm carrying that forward. But are we able to use scribes, especially for students who use AAC or gestured responses to create documentation of what they have? Are we responding using video and other multimedia platforms? Sometimes for students, when math fluency is the issue, I let them use calculation devices as part of our accommodation plan for that student so that they're just showing me their understanding of the concept, and we're not testing, we're not having them show something that is affected by a barrier related to math computations they may have. A lot of times allowing kids to take notes and allowing predictive text apps and other graphic organizers, I let a lot of students fill in their answers for me. I don't need a huge volume of writing, but can you draw me a picture and show it in a graphic organizer is a great way to represent learning during, especially in that core content area. So Tanya, what are people saying about the way kids respond in their classrooms and during COVID?
Sorry, I was multitasking. I'm trying to make a list so that I can put it in the chat because not everyone can see all of them. So some of the more recent ones that people said after the last one we talked about. So, excuse me.
I'm putting you to work.
We talked about people shared Class Dojo.
Yes.
And then tracking the reader on Zoom using the cursor over the shared script so that people can see what's being said. Screencast-o-matic, Screencastify. Kefi shared about Padlet, which is a virtual poster board to share ideas.
Yes.
And then somebody shared, that was it so far. So then I'm gonna go ahead and list these out so that people can see them written out.
Excellent. I love those ideas. And Padlet's one I've been getting used to using too. And I think a lot of, I've been teaching for 12 years, and I think a lot of the things that I'm doing now during COVID, well, I can understand that it's not for everyone. It may provide new platforms for me providing information to students and also receiving information from students. So I'm excited to move forward and continue to use some of this assistive technology and these new platforms in my classroom. Setting accommodations are critical for all of our students, and setting accommodations are really hard right now during COVID. I think I've been trying to work with families to understand the things we do in our schools and classrooms to support learners, but I think we've globally recognized that as much as we can control school settings to make them safe, to make them secure, to eliminate noise, to eliminate distraction, that's out of our control at home. I'm outside of our control at home. Kids have so much they're dealing with, and so a setting accommodation, even like considering that we're asking students rather than to do real-time learning with a teacher in the front of the room, now we're part of their setting is this computer or the worksheets with no teacher, or figuring out how to get interactions from their, like how do interactions with parents as teachers work as part of their new setting. And we're seeing how important the way we create our classrooms, our settings for students, how that affects learning. So the types of setting accommodations, and start throwing them into the Q&A, the way you guys build beautiful classrooms that accommodate for a variety of types of learners. Some things we want to take into consideration that can support learners in our classrooms are, how do we change the location of a student to reduce distractions and increase focus? Do we use study corrals? Do we use noise canceling headphones? Are they near, up front and close to the teacher, or are they farther in the back? To give them a little more space, because changing the location can also prevent students distracting other students, and giving them a place to sort of get whatever sensory needs they have taken care of. I know I have a lot of students who need a little more opportunity to stand up and sit down. I hope at home they're getting that. I hope at home they're getting their sensory breaks, and that they can break up the work the way they need to get their needs met. But seating location can be so important. The seating style on a yoga ball or a tea stool can increase a kid's ability to learn in that classroom. Or are they working independently? And some kids, independent, sitting in isolation isn't their best situation, but sitting in a group might be really functional. And then also we can, just the way we help kids increase access to special, make sure they have access to special equipment, make sure they have physical access to a space, or organize their space. And I think teachers are so amazing at labeling or color coding or creating the visuals in our room that set that space up for students to be able to learn. And not everybody's going to need your color coding, but you know there are some kids who do. And the visuals we hang out, this is intentionally accommodating some kids' need for extra structure within our settings. So Tanya, did anybody have great setting accommodations, the classroom things they want to go back to because they know they work with kids?
Sure, we have a couple suggestions and also a couple questions. So we can either save those at the end, or I can share them with you now, Amy. So the suggestions were having a table of contents for notebooks with a place for students to record their scores on their completed assignments. And then having the student pick the place and then how they sit. You know, having a student create a special space, and, you know, he didn't like it, so then he was able to find a different place that worked for him.
Yes! And don't we want to be able to do that for our kids right now? Oh, it's a gift. So do we have, what are the questions? And I can maybe...
Sure. One of them, and I've been trying to multitask and also find some resources for this question, but one was, you know, confusion around IEP Online and what an accommodation would be versus a modification. And so Kristen just shared that, you know, she's noticed that sometimes things are put in the modification section that she's not sure really are modifications. So she was wondering about some clarification for that. Fabulous. And then there was another question. Oh, go ahead. I'll pause there.
I'm going, as soon as I get through the accommodations, I'm going to show in juxtaposition to the modifications, because I think that is a great question. How are we accommodating and how are we modifying, and what is the difference? And I think I do see oftentimes crossover within documentation, which is not judgment. It's just like, it's very hard to pick them apart. Just the same way it is understanding our kids' needs. They're so complex. These things often overlap or could be mixed up. But yeah, I think that's a great question. I'll get to that.
Mm-hmm. And then we had a couple more suggestions. So one, someone else also sharing about flexible seating, allowing students to be comfortable while they're learning. And then another suggestion from Sandy to pass along those accommodations to parents so they can try to also support at home with learning.
Yes, yes. I love all of that, and the flexible seating movement is awesome. We have a 4th grade classroom at our school that just went entirely flexible seating. You walk in there and it's like a super posh book lounge, which I think they're all just Goodwill chairs, so it's not expensive. It was just like reused. And I have a student in that classroom who is in a wheelchair, and it is so cool that he is by far not in the most unique seating arrangement of all the other kids who are in there. He's just one of the guys in a unique seating arrangement. And absolutely passing that on to parents, that just because, like, in our classrooms, we don't all have to sit in the hard wooden chairs. In your home, learning can happen on the sofa. And I think it's changing that norm. And understanding that accommodations, it could feel to a parent who maybe doesn't have the same, like, they just need to be given the information, like, this is okay, he can still learn, she can still learn. So good points.
Yeah, and we're at about 10 minutes left.
Perfect.
So I've just given you a time check. And we do have one question whenever you're ready to transition to the Q&A section. I can wait till you're ready.
Perfect. I'll just hit this last one and then go into modifications, then we'll do a question. So the last piece is so critical, I think. It's the timing, scheduling accommodations, and we can do a lot with this for all of our kids and how we set up our days and the way we organize the information that we're giving. And this resource down here, the Iris Peabody Vanderbilt resource that I'm linking to, have grids show layouts that show what need an accommodation might be addressing and the variety of accommodations that you might be able to resource. At the end, if you're clicking on links, that might be one that is useful because it's a nice organization of a lot of different resources. And so when you look at what they suggest, our timing and scheduling accommodations could be addressing processing, the way children process information, the way that they stay focused, the frustration and anxiety. We're going to have a lot of that, I think, moving into the future, and managing time. And a majority of these accommodations are going to help struggling students if we picture our population recovering from this trauma or experiencing this trauma. How are we going to break large assignments into pieces? How are we going to extend response time and give children opportunity to process, because we know that's going to be impacted? Creating checklists or check-ins and time limits for kids to help them stay organized as our minds are in a lot of places at once. This PBIS idea of making sure that all of our kids are getting access to the positive reinforcement they need as we break things into pieces and reinforce for them achieving those little pieces over time. And so I'm going to keep moving just in the interest of time, but I know everyone has a lot of ways that they're going to support with the timing and the scheduling as we're moving forward. And so finally, getting into the accommodations versus modifications. And modifications are often the things that are going to change, lower, or reduce the learning expectation. So, for example, we're not expecting a student to do the same learning as their peers. Maybe it's a shorter lesson, a piece of a lesson, fewer problems, a reduced assignment. And I think this is very different than having a student try and complete an entire writing assignment, maybe using voice text or having them just get a few ideas on paper is good enough. Lowering the expectation for that student. That on writing, we'll just make them do 3 sentences. Or on math, you're just going to do 2 or 3 of the problems that are, we'll circle the easiest ones. So we've changed the standard. And we're expecting them to just show us a piece. And my only, so I think that's the big difference is with accommodations, we're trying to keep the standard the same. We're trying to keep the learning target the same. So when we look back at what the student has produced, we can compare it across, we can compare what they've generated across the class. Did they learn this skill? Are they demonstrating this skill? Do they have an understanding of this standard? Where a modification, we may not be able to get that same information because they just did a part of it. So we won't have a whole picture, maybe, of how far the student moved towards the standard. And I think both are acceptable for my students who have a profound impact, a lot of barriers. Oftentimes, I don't need them to achieve that standard. It's as a team, an IEP team, we can work together and decide that we want them to have access to that content standard, but we're going to allow them a modified expectation, and they'll just do part of the work. And so this University of Kansas resource actually is really, oh, I don't know if you can see it now. Oh, there you go. Down at the bottom of the page, has a really more in-depth consideration between accommodations and modifications, and the considerations teams might want to take as you're choosing one or the other, and what we want to teach children about what they're capable of, and what we want to teach, what we want to normalize within our communities. Do we want to normalize that accommodating students' barriers is appropriate, and the benefit of that? And so I think it's, I don't know if I completely answered the question. Tanya, do you have any more on modification accommodation?
We didn't have any other questions around that. I do think that you answered the original question. I also put in the similar language and a link to understood.org. It has a nice chart that shows kind of the differences between both. And then we had, a few more people adding some other strategies they've had to really personalize learning for students. Again, thinking about seating. Some student needed captions, another a very sharp pencil, which I know really helps me as well. And then somebody asked about behavior accommodations, right? That the tools that this person's using maybe aren't working as well as we'd like to see. So, asking about a book or website to find some additional ideas.
Oh, well, I think the
so
PBIS,
I'm reaching out too, and I'll see if we get a suggestion in our time that we have left today.
Oh, good. Because I really do like the PBIS resource that George shared. I'm a huge believer in the idea, these multi-tiered systems. Oftentimes what happens for our students who experience the most profound impact from behavior, we inadvertently remove them from their exposure to the tier 1 and tier 2 behavior interventions. And so I'm not presuming that this is what's happening, but I want to make sure all teams are investigating. Are our kids with the most impact hearing the rules? Are they getting time to practice the rules the same way all of our students are? Of course, I know his graffiti sign was great, but making sure that they understand the rules, and then building in our levels of support from there. And I've had our schools had a lot of success with positive behavior supports for students, but understanding that even within that, the scariest piece of PBIS, but is also powerful, is that rigorous implementation can take 3 to 5 years to really change a student's overall overarching behavior. So you're doing the right thing, staying the course, but the changes for significantly impacted students can take time. And hopefully we're finding ways to get interventions to families now so that the work we've done in our systems to support behavior are carried over at home, because we know this is a long-term investment. We know that it's going to take time. So yeah, add anything to that, Tanya, but I would say continue with the PBIS and understand that it takes time.
Yeah, I totally agree, and others have typed in, I think, some really wise considerations, which are, even with all of this individualization, it goes back to what's going to work for the student. So it's choice and what's actually functional. And that, you know, with all of these, with accommodations and modifications, it's not about a laundry list. It's really it goes back to that relationship and really knowing the student and the family and what's going to show improved outcomes, which is what we're all trying to see.
Absolutely.
For students. So I think with that, it might be a good time to transition to closing.
Yes.
So if you have any final thoughts, Amy, we can let you share those.
Okay. Well, I just am so glad for all of that input, because absolutely when we're thinking about anything we do, I try and come back to, how do teachers, all of you who are serving students, center on each student? And that is how we're able to serve 20 some odd kids, 30 some odd kids, 100 kids in our schools, in our classrooms, on our caseloads, because of the relationships we built, because of the understanding, because of the ways we invest specifically in each student. We can't do the laundry list for everyone. We have to know the student and center on them to be able to serve them. And in so doing, we model for the world how to help each other achieve success, the benefit of all of us achieving success together. And we teach students who need extra help, it's okay to need help. And to be able to advocate for themselves in the future. So teachers are my heart. Public education is my heart. I want you all to know that I'm rooting for you and what you're doing for students, and we'll be back in our classrooms soon, better than ever. So thank you for spending an hour with me.
Thank you so much, Amy. I'm gonna try to swap this now so that I can do the closing. So just very briefly, everyone, we are going to save the chat log and the Q&A and make sure that if there are any questions that we didn't get to today, that gets incorporated onto the website. If you have any further questions or things that you're wondering about, the sisl@k12.wa.us is a great inbox to send any lingering questions that you have. A recording of this session will be available by May 4th on our MTSS webpage, and that will be captioned, although, you know, we had live as well with Amy's great modeling. And then on the MTSS webpage, there's also the link for the clock hours. And so you do have to I believe, fill that out today. So you have through the end of today to get that if you need to turn that in. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, everyone, for the great participation and the wonderful questions. It's been an honor. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.